Okay, so diving in with Sunny Jetsun today. Got a whole stack of his poems here, some bio stuff too. And wow, intense is putting it mildly. Not your average poetry reading, that's for sure.
Definitely pushes some buttons. I'd say Jetson's work, it's like raw, you know? Like a nerve ending, just out there vibrating.
Seriously, it's like he took a trip straight into his own head, just started writing, no filter. And the imagery he uses, man, wild doesn't even cut it.
Right. You get these crazy juxtapositions, like what's Himalayan salt doing next to organic cake? It's like he's trying to crack open the way we're used to seeing things.
And don't even get me started on the asterisks. Everywhere. It's like he's trying to make certain parts stand out, but why? What am I supposed to do with that?
Maybe that's the whole point. He wants you to grapple with it, find your own way through the chaos, you know? This isn't just like background poetry.
Right on. So who is this Sunny Jetsun anyway? Give us the basics.
Well, Jetson was a poet, an artist, called himself a spiritual seeker, part of that whole counterculture movement back in the 60s. Spent decades traveling, experimenting with, well, psychedelics.
So we've got a free spirit on our hands. Got it. What were his poems even about, though?
To get Jetson, you got to get into his headspace, you know? He was super into Eastern spirituality, especially Hinduism, Buddhism, that kind of thing. You see a lot of chakras, kundalini energy.
Hold on, kundalini energy. For those of us who haven't, quit our jobs to meditate on a mountaintop, what are we talking about here?
Right. So kundalini, it's this primal energy, right? Supposedly coiled up at the base of your spine. And when it's awakened, that's supposed to lead to, like, enlightenment, higher consciousness, all that.
Okay, so powerful stuff. Jetson's trying to tap into that through writing.
That's the idea. And he wasn't picky about his tools. Psychedelics were definitely part of the equation.
Yeah, he was pretty upfront about that, wasn't he? Not exactly hiding the drug use.
Not at all. He saw LSD, other psychedelics as tools, you know, a way to explore consciousness, break down those walls of perception. But it was the 60s, even then, pretty controversial stuff.
Still is, man. But hey, we're not here to judge, just trying to understand the man, understand the work. Speaking of, how about we hear some of this poetry?
Let's do it.
All right, buckle up. Here's a taste. Manifested in Himalayan mineral salts, becoming one with it, reawakening us, our rays of light dancing in the water, feeding the feeling body, the juicy mind. Let it run through you, giving yourself the opening allowance of the process to happen. Don't want pesticides. Eating a holistic organic cake experience of the difference.
Oh,
Okay, that's a lot to unpack.
it really is. That's Jetson in a nutshell, though, right? Just throws all these images at you, almost random, like he's plugged directly into his subconscious.
So how do we even begin to make sense of this?
Well, you can start by looking for those recurring themes, symbols. Nature pops up a lot, especially water.
Yeah, rivers, oceans, rain, it's everywhere.
Right, but it's not just pretty scenery. Water, it represents this flow, interconnectedness that was key to his whole philosophy. Remember us talking about Eastern spirituality, that whole non-duality thing?
Refresh my memory.
Basically, the idea that everything's connected, no real separation between us, the universe, all of it. And water, always moving, always changing. It's a perfect way to show that.
So we've got this whole, water equals interconnectedness thing going on.
Exactly.
But Jetson, he doesn't just stick to pretty nature poems, does he? Gets into some kind of dark stuff sometimes.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I mean, we're talking sex, drugs, this real anger at the world. It's a lot, even for someone who's, open-minded.
Well, remember, he saw himself as this, truth seeker, right?
Yeah.
Not afraid to go to those difficult places. And for Jetson, that meant digging into the darker parts of, being human.
Right.
The systems he thought were messing us up.
And he was not shy about calling those systems out either. Government, corporations, anybody in charge, basically.
Right. He was really concerned about greed, corruption, this whole, grabbing for power at the expense of everything else. He talks about hyper-profits of power, wealth and resources to only the few, warns about predators with hedge money sucking us all dry as a bone, even mentions the military-industrial complex and how it creates suffering. So you can see where that anger's coming from.
Yeah, and it's not just the big picture stuff either, right? It gets really personal about relationships too. Romantic ones especially. There's this whole thing about love orgasms, femme fatales. He even talks about, unusual arrangements. It's a lot.
Yeah, he doesn't shy away from the complications of, love, sex, intimacy. You've got lines like precious symbols, your fingers twirling in her rings of Venus, and Krishna bending double helixes into his favorite gopis. It's clear that for Jetson, sex was about more than just the physical. It was tied up with freedom, liberation, even spirituality.
Which I guess makes sense given the whole, non-duality, everything's connected thing we talked about.
Yeah.
But then he's got this other side too. Heartbreak, betrayal. There's a lot of pain mixed in there.
Absolutely. Like when he talks about someone stealing my energy, taking away my trust, always one who takes the power, others left with shattered dreams. That vulnerability, the raw edges of just being a person, even when it hurts.
And that rawness, that anger about how messed up things are, it's like it feeds into his concern for the environment too, right?
It's all connected for Jetsun. That same system that's hurting people is destroying the planet. He talks about the Amazon, the coral reefs, all the pollution. It's like he's desperate for us to wake up and see what we're doing to our own home.
Like he sees this whole web, right? Greed, corruption, it's all connected. And he's just furious about it.
And he's not just complaining in this general way either. He calls out specific politicians, corporations, accuses them of manufacturing of war and spinning untruth order, even goes after particular people. Like there's this line about Cheney hoodlums fearing perjury, committing another harsh felony, set a legal precedent for waterboarding only 266 hours.
Damn. He is not holding back. But how do we as readers even process this? It's a lot to throw at you.
That's the thing about Jetsun, right? He's not about easy answers or neat little truths. He's just putting it all out there, good, bad, the ugly, everything, and asking you to sit with it.
So here we are, this whole chaotic, passionate, kind of overwhelming world he's created. What are we supposed to take away from Sunny Jetsun, from his poetry?
$1 million question, right? He doesn't exactly give you a roadmap, does he? No easy answers.
Yeah, like he's saying, here's what I see, what I feel, now you deal with it.
Exactly, and he's confronting you with it all. The beauty, the ugliness, love, pain, personal, political, all smashed together. And he does it in this raw, unfiltered way. Can be exhilarating, can be exhausting.
It's a lot. So how do we even make sense of it? Is there a right way to read his stuff?
I don't think there's one right way, but I think looking at it through the lens of his spiritual searching helps. He wants to break free from all that, societal conditioning, tap into something real, something deeper. And he'll use anything to get there. Poetry, psychedelics, Eastern philosophy, it's all on the table.
It's like he's on this quest for enlightenment or something, but instead of finding peace, it's anger, frustration, this urgency about the state of the world.
And he pours all that into his writing. That's why it feels so raw, so immediate. It's all just pouring out of him, no filter, no apologies.
So then what do we do with it? All this raw emotion, the images, anger, beauty, all smashed together. What's the takeaway for us?
Maybe it's not about finding answers. Maybe it's about learning to ask better questions, about looking at the world, at ourselves even, in a way. As wild as it can be, Jetsun's work, it reminds us there's always more to explore, more to question, more to feel.
It's like he's giving us permission to break free ourselves
Yeah.
from whatever is holding us back, to embrace the mess, the contradictions.
Right, don't be afraid to feel it all. The darkness, the light, it's all part of the deal. Just embrace the complexity and see where it takes you.
Well, there you have it. A little trip into the mind of Sunny Jetsun. Confusing. Totally. Thrilling. Absolutely. But one thing's for sure, the man was intense. And maybe that intensity, that drive to break free from the norm and find his own truth, that's the real message. What about us? Are we brave enough to really look at the world, at ourselves, with that same honesty? Something to think about.